The frontier town of Ridgetop simmered under the merciless noon sun, its dusty main street shimmering like a heated blade. When Elara Whitlock found herself standing alone against the two men, everyone else feared too much to defy. Her husband, Thomas, had been gone for 2 months now, lost to a mining collapse that left her widowed, penniless, and with nothing but the child he had sworn he'd live long enough to raise. But life on the frontier was rarely merciful, and debts were harsher than winters on Ironback Ridge. As Elara hung her laundry on the cracked wooden rail of her porch, she heard the heavy, cruel footsteps of the Hawthorne brothers approaching. Rowan and Warren were known for collecting debts with fists, guns, or whatever cruelty suited them, and the moment Elara saw the dark glint in their eyes, she knew they had come not to talk, but to take.
"Time's up," Warren growled,
his shadow stretching across her doorway like a warning. "Your husband owed us more than you can ever pay." Elara clutched her baby protectively, but the brothers had no patience left, no soul left, and no pity ever to begin with. Rowan stepped forward, fingers curling like talons. "We don't want excuses. We want collateral." Before she could scream, before she could even turn to run, they ripped the baby from her arms, shoving her to the ground as her child began to wail in terror. Elara clawed at the dirt, sobbing, crawling after them. But the brothers moved, with the cold efficiency of men who believed they were above law, above morality, above humanity. They placed the infant into a roughly built wooden cradle cart tied behind their horses and began dragging it toward town, the wheels rattling over stones as though announcing the theft to the entire world. "You can't," Elara cried, stumbling after them. "Please, he's all I have." But the brothers didn't so much as flinch. Ridgetop's townsfolk watched from a distance, trapped between sympathy and fear. A woman cried out for someone to help, but no one stepped forward. Not the storekeepers, not the miners, not the gamblers on the saloon porch. The Hawthorns owned this place. Everyone knew it. Everyone accepted it. Everyone feared it. As Elara collapsed in the dirt of the town square, the world around her blurred, a mix of anguish, dust, and hopelessness. And then, above the sound of her sobs, came the low, thunderous rumble of hooves echoing across the mountains. The crowd turned, heads lifted, voices whispered with something that almost resembled hope. Only one man rode with that kind of power. Elias Creed, the mountain man of Ironback Ridge, a giant carved by wilderness, a wanderer whose name carried the weight of a legend. Few people knew his history, even fewer knew his heart. But all knew one thing. When Elias Creed rode into a town, fate rode with him. His towering stallion slowed as he reached the town square, dust swirling around him like a storm bowing to its master. Elias dismounted with an effortless grace, his boots thudding into the earth. His hair was wild, his shoulders broad as an oak trunk, and his eyes, dark and sharp, locked instantly onto Elara kneeling on the ground. He saw her shaking hands. He saw the cradle cart being dragged away, and his entire body changed, tightening like a coiled predator preparing to strike. "Elara?" he asked, voice deep as canyon stone. She looked up at him through tears, recognition flickering for a moment. Elias had fought beside her husband long ago, and though years had passed since she last saw him, his presence hit her with the force of a miracle she never expected. Her voice broke. "They took my baby." Elias did not ask why. He did not negotiate. He simply turned, slow and deliberate, toward the Hawthorne brothers, who now stood smugly at the courthouse steps. Warren smirked and taunted. "This ain't your business." "Greed." But Elias was already walking. Rowan stepped forward, placing a hand on Elias's shoulder to shove him back. It was a mistake he would regret for the rest of his days. Elias grabbed Rowan's wrist, squeezing until the man screamed and sank to his knees. Warren drew his pistol, but Elias slammed his forearm into the man's ribs, sending the weapon skittering across the dirt. Gasps erupted from the crowd. The Hawthorns, untouchable, unstoppable, ruthless, were suddenly helpless in the hands of a single man. Elias marched past them and snatched the cradle cart's rope, lifting it effortlessly before gently picking up the crying infant. The moment the child touched Elias's chest, the baby quieted, sensing safety, strength, and something pure. Elias walked back to Ilara, kneeling beside her, placing the child into her arms. "No one," he said, voice steady as mountain stone, "takes a child while I stand." The square fell silent. Every heart beat faster. Every eye watched. Every fear cracked just a little. Elias rose slowly, towering, turning toward the battered brothers. "This town has been afraid long enough." In that moment, the sun glinted behind him like a crown of fire. And for the first time since Thomas died, Ilara felt something she thought she'd never feel again. Hope, fierce and bright, like a spark waiting to become a blaze. The echo of Elias Creed's warning still hung in the dry air when Rowan and Warren Hawthorne staggered to their feet, fury burning hotter than their broken bones. And the town of Ridgetop seemed to hold its breath as the two men barked, orders to their hired guns lurking in the shadows. The sun hung high, merciless and blinding, beating down on the wooden storefronts and frightened faces lining the square. Ilara stood near the water trough, clutching her baby, while Elias positioned himself between her and danger, his massive frame radiating calm certainty. The kind a man only earned from years of surviving storms deeper and deadlier than any outlaw could imagine. Rowan snarled, "You think one mountain rat can take our town from us?" And with a sharp whistle, 6 armed gunmen emerged, rifles trained on Elias with cold, deadly precision. A hush fell over the gathered crowd as Elias lifted his head, meeting each gunman's glare with quiet, unshakable resolve. "You boys really want to die for two cowards who steal babies?" he asked, voice low and steady. The question fractured the moment. Some gunmen hesitated, shifting uneasily, but Warren, clutching his bruised ribs, shouted, "Fire on my signal!" Before that signal could escape his lips, Elias moved with a suddenness that defied his size. He lunged toward the nearest pillar, using it as cover as bullets detonated across the square, splintering wood, sending townsfolk scattering like startled birds. Ilara ducked behind the trough, hands shaking as she shielded her child. Her breath caught in her throat. Elias burst from cover, tackling one gunman and slamming him into the dust before rolling, aside to avoid another shot. The sheriff, caught between self-preservation and long-forgotten duty, shouted for everyone to stand down, but the Hawthorne's rage drowned him out. Another shot ricocheted off a post near Elias's head, and the mountain man seized the fallen gunman's rifle, not to fire it, but to snap it clean over his knee, tossing the pieces aside as if breaking kindling. The gunman faltered. No one had ever seen strength like that. Two charged at him, but Elias grabbed one by the coat, swinging him into the other, so forcefully they crashed. Through the saloon's front window in a spray of shattered glass. The crowd gasped. Warren, desperate, pointed at Elias. "Kill him!" But fear had crept into the gunman's eyes, the kind of fear that made even hardened men rethink their allegiance. Only one remained bold enough to raise his weapon, but as he aimed, Elias hurled a wooden barrel that struck the man square in the chest, knocking him flat. The square fell silent, except for Warren and Rowan's panicked, breathing as they backed. Against the courthouse doors, two predators suddenly realizing they were prey. Elias stepped forward, dust swirling around his boots, shoulders rising and falling with controlled breaths. "It ends now," he said. The sheriff swallowed hard, finally stepping down from his horse, spurred by the sight of townsfolk, who were no longer hiding but standing, watching, waiting. For years, the Hawthornes had ruled by fear, but fear was slipping through their fingers like dry sand. Elias grabbed both brothers by their collars and dragged them, kicking, cursing, pleading, into the center of the square where everyone could see them. "These men stole a child," Elias said, voice booming across the silent street. "They've bled this town for years and called it debt. But no more." The sheriff, trembling, looked to the crowd. For the first time, Ridgetop chose truth over terror. People shouted, voices once timid, now strong, calling for justice, demanding accountability. A jury formed within minutes, made of miners, mothers, shopkeepers, and ranch hands, people who had lived under the Hawthorne's shadow for too long. The verdict was swift. The brothers were to be held in chains for the territorial marshal. As their shackles snapped shut, Warren screamed curses while Rowan swore he'd return, but no one listened anymore. The Hawthorns' reign was over. Elias finally turned back to Ilara, who held her child close, tears glittering in her dust-streaked cheeks. "You're safe now," he said softly, wiping dirt from her forehead with surprising gentleness. "They won't touch you again." She trembled as relief washed over her. "I don't know how to thank you." Elias shook his head. "You don't have to." But she did, because he hadn't just saved her child. He'd given Ridgetop its courage back. As twilight settled across the mountains, lanterns glowed in shop windows and neighbors spoke to one another with a hope that had long been absent, a hope sparked by one man who refused to let evil stand. Elias walked beside Ilara toward her home, and for the first time since Thomas died, she felt a future opening like a dawn after a long storm. And if you want more stories of courage, justice, and legends forged in fire, make sure